T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And we are live, if I did everything properly. Hey everyone, it is Sunday, July 14th, 2024. It's 4 p.m. local time here in Texas. If you're tuning in, let me know in the comment section if you can hear me, if you can see me, and where you're tuning in from. I know it's been a hot minute since I have done a live stream, so I'm hoping that I still remember how to do everything. And if not, then we will figure it out along the way. Now, I wanted to do this special Sunday live stream because we had an event, as you may have heard, here in the United States yesterday, in which there was an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And now, if you followed me, you know that I am critical of presidents all around, right, left, right, Republican, Democrat. I try to criticize them all pretty equally. And I've spent the last now almost 24 hours just in a place of reading as much as I can read, following up on all of the reports, reading a lot of different opinions on social media. It's been kind of interesting to see. I know that Trump is a very polarizing figure, just as he is. And so when you come to a situation like this, where it appears as though the shooting was carried out, the FBI, they have their guy, right? They've told us who they believe that the suspect is. And now you kind of have the media, social media really going on a manhunt of their own, trying to figure out what do we know about the suspected shooter. And also at the same time, trying to figure out how could this have happened? I mean, Trump isn't just a former president. He is the front runner to become the next president at a time when our current sitting president and the other, right, one of the other top two candidates, Joe Biden, has been struggling in recent weeks, to say the least. You've seen growing calls for him to step down altogether. And so for something like this to happen to Trump, it seems as though there was just a lapse in security that I know is making a lot of people wonder, was it deliberate, right? How could this have possibly happened? The security at an event like this should be the tightest possible, right? You have the Secret Service there with Trump. You have, I know local law enforcement was also involved. And so we are going to be getting into and talking about all of that and some of the latest reports there that we found out about apparently what the law enforcement were up to, which it feels like the more that we find out about this, the more shocking it becomes. Now, I'll also be keeping an eye on your comments here. It looks like I've got at least YouTube, maybe Facebook, and even maybe Rumble here. So it looks like y'all can hear me and see me, which is a good start to this. So far, so good. All good. Thank you to everyone joining in. I know for some of you, although it's the middle of the day here in the US, it is the middle of the night where you are. So if you're joining in live, then thank you for making the time to do so. All right, let's check in now on some of the latest reports. If I can get this up here on the screen, that is half the battle, into seeing, because the Associated Press actually came out with a report just a little bit ago that I found even shocking. And I know that that's saying a lot to say that it's shocking. They came out with this report. Now, they're initially saying the FBI says it has not determined a motive for assassination attempt on former President Trump. I know that the FBI just came out a little bit ago. They're saying that on the heels of an attempt to kill him, former President Trump called Sunday for unity and resilience as shocked leaders across the political divide recoiled from the shooting that left him wounded but quote unquote fine. A former fire chief attending the rally with family was, of course, killed, as was the gunman. Two other people were also critically wounded. I know we're hearing from the family of that fire chief talking about how he was a hero until the very last minute, how he dove over his wife and daughter to protect them from the gunfire. Now, when it comes to the shooter, they say that the FBI identified the shooter, who was then fatally shot by Secret Service agents, as Thomas Matthew Crooks, always going for those three names there, aged 20, of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, and said that he attacked from an elevated position outside the rally venue at a farm show in Butler. Now, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro identified the rally goer who was killed as Corey Comparator, a former fire chief from the area, and said that he died a hero. Now, the FBI has not determined yet a motive, but the agency believed that Crooks acted alone and that he was not previously on the Bureau's radar. That's interesting that they're pointing it out there. I know a lot of times when we see school shootings, the suspect, it turns out, as we saw in the Parkland shooting over in Florida, that you have a suspect that was reported to the FBI multiple times and they appeared to have done nothing. So notable that they are saying this. They also say the agency is combing through his social media feeds and weapons, but so far has not found any threatening writing or social media posts. They say that the absence of a clear ideological motive a full day later added to the deepening questions about the shooting and prevented the nation from drawing swift or tidy conclusions about one of the most shocking crimes in U.S. history. Now, I want to get to the part here. Okay, here we are. This is the part that I was looking for in the story. They say, not long before shots rang out, rally goers noticed a man climbing to the roof of a nearby building and warned local police. According to two law enforcement officials, we've seen videos of bystanders, eyewitnesses who mentioned this. They said that one local police officer climbed to the roof and encountered Crooks, who pointed his rifle at the officer. The officer retreated down the ladder, and Crooks quickly took a shot toward Trump. And that's when Secret Service snipers shot him, said the officials who spoke to the Associated Press, of course, remained anonymous. The officials also told the AP that bomb-making materials were found inside Crooks' vehicle and bomb-making materials were found at his home. Officials described the devices as rudimentary. Now, here's where this almost, to me, it's interesting. And I know that there's a lot of commentary, a lot of opinions going around there with people saying different things. To me, thinking of, okay, this guy's up on the roof, right? He's laying down, he's got his rifle. We've seen there's images and videos of this on social media. You've got people warning, saying that they were going to police, telling them, hey, there's a guy on the roof with a gun pointed at the Trump rally. This idea that a police officer climbed up to the roof, the gunman looks at him, points the gun at him, and then immediately points it back and shoots a pretty dang good shot that arguably would have hit Trump's head if he hadn't moved his head right then. I mean, is it possible? Sure. Does it make me a little bit skeptical of what they're putting out there? Yes, absolutely. Also taking into account the fact that, and I know that part of this is, look, police, they see the eyewitnesses out there telling the media, hey, we were warning about this. We were putting the warnings out there to police. So obviously police have to have a response. Again, this report is coming from anonymous officials. So we'll say what they actually say, quote unquote, officially when they decide to address this. But it's interesting to me that that's what's being said even by anonymous officials. Now, another part of this is also the fact that, and you hear it on the video when you hear the gunshots ring out, it sounded as though the gunman got out about 3 shots and then he was shot by a sniper who was up on the rooftop. And it does make you wonder, okay, you've got the sniper up here. He immediately has the gunman in his sights. It seems as though there are definitely more questions than answers at this point. I know that a lot of people are in a state of looking at this and going kind of where I'm going, where I'm reading the official story and going, okay, I feel like this doesn't quite add up. This could be just different people telling, I guess, their versions of it. But a lot of questions almost 24 hours later. And I know that people are really kind of diving into, okay, who was this guy, Thomas Michael Crooks? What do we know about him? It seems as though typically, as we've seen in the case, when you have mass shootings that are carried out by these guys, they have some kind of manifesto or they've taken to social media. They want their name to be known. They want the notoriety. And we have yet to find this with this guy, right? We have yet to kind of see, okay, was it ideological? Because the reality is that when it comes to someone like Donald Trump, I mentioned before that he is a very polarizing figure, but it's not just because of what Donald Trump says, it's also because of how you have other politicians and people in the media react to him. And I think that that's another important part here is when you look at the rhetoric that is put out there, and I want to bring up that article here, the rhetoric that is being put out about Trump or that has been in the past. RT compiled a number of different comments that we can look at, everything from the classic Kathy Griffin literally holding what is supposed to be Trump's head bloodied and beheaded, right? Everything from that back in, I believe that was in 2016, if that's right. You had things like that. You also have other commentary, right? As they noted, speaking to MSNBC after Trump formally announced his presidential campaign last year, Representative Congressman Dan Goldman declared that his fellow New Yorker cannot be allowed to, quote, see public office again, saying he is not only unfit, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated. That's a call to assassinate Trump, right? And he's not the only one. I mean, we've seen numerous calls like this. As they noted, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi used similar rhetoric last week when she declared that the upcoming presidential election is not a normal election and that Trump must be stopped. He cannot be president. Now, I think that that's kind of where people are looking at, the suspected gunman that the FBI has said, hey, this is our guy. They're looking at him and they're going, okay, was this some guy who listened to all of this rhetoric, right? Listened to even the current sitting president, Joe Biden, saying, Donald Trump is a genuine threat to this nation. He's a threat to our freedom. He's a threat to our democracy. He's literally a threat to everything America stands for. And it's such a reminder that when you have this rhetoric that is put out there, right? When you have politicians and the media literally telling you, hey, this guy is the next Hitler, right? This guy is going to destroy our country. It actually makes me surprised that we haven't had more assassination attempts. They're literally up there telling you it's becoming so ingrained in the minds of Americans that this guy is going to lead to the end of democracy as we know it. Now, of course, when you look to them and you say, hey, you're putting out this hateful rhetoric about one of the top two people who's running for office, are you calling for him? You're saying he needs to be eliminated. Are you calling for him to be assassinated? Well, then they'll say, no, of course not. We're just calling for Americans to vote harder, to get out to the ballot box, to vote blue no matter who, even if the person that the Democrats are putting up is literally Joe Biden, who can't seem to make up his mind about world leaders, his own vice president, or where he is at really any given moment, right? They'll insist that, oh, no, that's not actually what we're calling for here. And so when you get down to it, when you have this rhetoric that's out there, it's not surprising whatsoever that any individual would take it to heart and take up arms and try to assassinate Trump. Now, I know that there's also some speculation out there, right? When you look at the fact that we are in a position of the security failures, right? When you look at how could this have possibly happened? Was this just a case where you had local law enforcement on the ground handling the complaints from the civilians that were there that were telling him, hey, there's a guy on a roof with a rifle. We need to pay attention to this. And they either relayed it to Secret Service, didn't do it properly, that sort of thing. Was it just the biggest security failure, or was it some sort of deep state involved shooting where they were trying to get out Trump? I know that that's something that's also been put out there. And I will say, look, in the position that I'm in, I'm still looking at everything that is being put out there, still asking a lot of questions, because I think that that is the important thing to do at the end of the day. Is we're still hours into this. There's still a lot of information that we need to know, but it is important to be in this position of saying, okay, is this something that we need to be concerned about when it comes to Trump's future, right? Because, and I will say, as someone who has covered Trump's first term in office, as someone who has been very critical of him, I look at him as a person, and I think this is someone who campaigned on draining the swamp and then filled his cabinet with swamp creatures, right? This is someone who campaigned on ending the endless wars and then not only continued those wars. And I know that there's some people that will argue with me on that one, but I would argue he still carried out a lot of warmongering on his end when it comes, especially when it comes to the Middle East, when it comes to his support for Israel and his, support for the increasing intentions there that has now led to, as we're seeing, Israel committing an all-out genocide in front of all of us, which Trump has yet to condemn. So when I look at it from the standpoint of, okay, does the deep state want to take this guy out, right? Do they want Trump dead at all costs so that he can't come back in come next January and he can't be in a position of not only being the president, but also being a president who may actually try to take on the deep state in some ways? I have a hard time thinking like, okay, Trump is the one who is going to come in and to save us all, because I just haven't seen that kind of rhetoric coming from him. And I haven't seen that when it comes to his record. But again, I think that there are a lot of questions that are still out there that we need to be asking. And I think it also does send a very important message, because we are in a time in this election where arguably the independent candidates and the third party candidates should be making waves like never before. I mean, we talk about another Trump versus Biden go around and we think, okay, who are the other candidates that are on the ballot? Why aren't we seeing more movement there? And I think that if there is a deep state message in this anywhere, that is what it comes down to. And it wasn't just some lone gunman that was able to get up there, got a lucky shot, and got away with the, security failure of the century. All of that was not the case. And it really was someone in the deep state trying to go after Trump. And they are ultimately sending a message, I would argue, that anyone who even questions the narrative, questions the US political establishment, the military industrial complex, even if they don't come in and do everything that they say that they're going to do, just someone who asks questions and acknowledges some of the things that Trump has acknowledged, that they could be targeted as a result, and that is something that they need to be very aware of. And so as we continue to watch this play out, and I do want to get into the conversation of some of the reactions here, right? The reactions we've seen from certain politicians who are speaking out and condemning political violence. I think that is always good to keep in mind. All right, I'm going to take a look at some of the comments here and see what y'all have been saying. And I appreciate everyone chiming in. Let me see over here. I'm looking at YouTube comments. Thank you. We've got at least one super chat in here from Magneto Masterman. So thank you so much for your contribution and for your support there. Again, you can donate at YouTube. I know you can donate at Rockfin too. I believe I have the Rockfin feed running. Again, it's been a while since I've done all of this, so bear with me on that one when it comes to getting everything set up, but I believe I got it set up. And yeah, the commentary, Andy from Beaverton pointing out here saying Biden said we need to put a bullseye on Trump. And yeah, I think that goes back to this comparison that we saw, Biden tweeting. The tweet that I was referring to earlier was from June 28th, 2024. So literally not even a month ago, where he's saying Trump is a genuine threat to this nation. And yeah, when you have, I mean, the sitting president, if you're following Biden and you're believing everything that he's saying, that Trump is a genuine threat to our democracy, then why wouldn't you act to take out a genuine threat, right? Why wouldn't you act to take out someone who is being compared to literally Hitler? I mean, the writing on the wall, the message that's being sent to Americans when you use rhetoric like this is that you need to target and go after this guy. And I mean, I think it's important to keep in mind because look, that's something that now they're having to contend with. And I think sometimes, we're in a position where the question has to be raised as well. We're looking at Trump, someone who already is the front runner right now, especially according to the latest polls, with a situation that Joe Biden is, which has not been looking very good for him on his end. And we obviously haven't seen the polls that are being, I'm sure that they are running polls like crazy right now, but it would not surprise me whatsoever if Trump's popularity skyrockets like crazy as a result of that. All right, Glow 8 says, who cares? And I know that is a genuine question that is being asked by a lot of people, not necessarily in this chat, but when it comes down to this, and I think one of the reasons why I want to talk about this, and I know that, I primarily cover US foreign policy, and so I'll kind of get into politics a little bit, but one of the main reasons I want to talk about this is because this is a big event for the United States. Our former president, our front runner to be the next president, was just almost shot to death. I mean, if he hadn't moved his head barely, that bullet could have easily hit him in the head. There's no telling if he would have survived that. And so I think it's an important conversation to have. Now, again, is there a lot of other important stuff going on in the world? Yes, absolutely. And I am saying all this, again, as someone who is very critical of Trump, very critical of his foreign policy. And if he gets back into office in January, I will continue to be critical and to hold him to account for his policies, because we are in a position where the United States is on the decline with its standing in the world, and it has done all of this to itself, right? The US has put itself in this position as a powerful empire, as holding the dollar and all of the power that it has with it. They put itself in this position by targeting countries around the world, by trying to take on Russia in a proxy war as if they are going to weaken Russia's economy, by supporting Israel as it is carrying out an all-out genocide against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And so, as it's just as important to talk about the Biden administration, what they're doing, what they're not doing right now, I think it's also important to talk about someone like Trump and someone who could very well be the next president for the next 4 years, because it's going to be not just the Biden administration's policies, but also the policies of, if Trump is reelected, a second Trump administration, who he fills his cabinet with, because I know that is definitely an important one here as we continue to watch. I want one of those, even just with the conversation of, when we're talking about who Trump's vice president is going to be, and I'm seeing names thrown around like Marco Rubio and like Nikki Haley, and I'm thinking that is absolutely, I would say, terrifying. Terrifying is a good word to think about one of those, not just neocons, but an individual who has made their way in the US political realm by never meeting a war that they didn't like. The idea that they could be the next vice president is a bit scary, because again, they're right next to the sitting president. I mean, as we've seen, not just with the Trump assassination attempt, but if he had been in office and if he was in fact assassinated, and you had someone like a Marco Rubio or a Nikki Haley as his vice president, guess what? They would be in charge. I think we're also seeing a version of that reality when we look at the current Biden administration. And you've got a lot of people realizing, well, one, Joe Biden is not running this country right now. There's no way that he's in charge of the United States, let alone in charge of most of his day, I would argue. But two, you also have his vice president as Kamala Harris, and a lot of, you know, legitimate concerns about the idea of Kamala Harris being in charge if Joe is to step down or if something is to happen to him on his end. All right, let's look now at some other comments before I continue on here. We've got Keith Stone saying that the mainstream narrative is falling apart quickly, now referring to the Trump assassination attempt. And yeah, we look at this, and again, I know I was talking about it earlier when it comes down to the fact that it's like, okay, well, the parts of this story just don't seem to make sense. And now, granted, do I know what happened? No, absolutely not. I'm not here to say that the mainstream story doesn't make sense because I was there and knew and saw everything. I'm going off of all of the data that's out there in the exact same way that y'all are on your end. Now, when it comes down to, let me see. We've got Dana Joe saying good distraction, though, for the majority, it seems per usual. Well, I mean, to a certain extent, the Democrats are, well, on one hand, they may be happy, right? Because they're not having to sit there and talk about Biden's health and whether he was able to continue on as the Democratic nominee. That conversation, not in the headlines now, maybe in a couple of days, but they may have gotten they may have been in a position where they're looking at least buying them some time. Now, let me see. We've also got a comment here mentioning the shooter was in a BlackRock advertisement a few years ago. Yeah, so he actually, I believe that was when he was in high school. BlackRock did an advertisement at this kid's high school. So I don't know quite how much involvement he had with that. I know that there's a lot of information coming out about, we've seen photos that appear to be him getting his high school diploma back in, I believe 2020. I don't know that the math would quite line up on that now that I'm thinking about the fact that they're saying that he was 20 years old. But there have been a lot of reports and a lot of stuff being put out there when it comes down to what we know about this guy. Yeah, I don't know. I do believe I've seen that he was in a video like a BlackRock advertisement at his high school, but I've also seen that video was taken down. So who knows how much involvement was there if that. I know a lot of people are kind of looking to tie some different things together as they are keeping an eye on what's happening here. All right, looking at another comment, we've got another super chat here from Duly Noted. Thank you so much for your contribution. He's saying, what's the chance Trump will push for a peace treaty Russia will accept? That's a really good question. All right. So I know that Trump has said, when it comes down to Ukraine, that he is going to solve the conflict in 24 hours, right? And then he doubled down at the debate claiming that he was going to solve everything as president-elect before he was even officially inaugurated. And when I look at what's being said about Trump's team, you've had some kind of anonymous sources saying that, Trump would present Russia with some sort of peace deal, basically to say, hey, we'll stop messing with Ukraine. We'll stop messing with Georgia. We'll promise to keep those countries, Ukraine more specifically, out of NATO. And we'll promise that there won't be more NATO expansion. Now, if that's the case, that could be the case that Trump could present that. The other part of your question there, what is the chances that Russia will accept this? Well, if you look over at Russia, they have been watching the United States for a while now, and they've gotten promises like that decades ago, right? NATO's saying we'll never expand toward the east. We definitely won't expand right up to your border. And they know that the NATO alliance has not only done the exact opposite of that, but they have carried out that expansion while claiming we're a defensive alliance, right? Don't worry about us. We're just continuing to expand right up to your border and continuing to cross red line after red line, almost getting to the point where they're ready to add Ukraine into the alliance. And even at this recent NATO summit, I mean, the wording that they used of claiming that Ukraine's pathway to NATO was irreversible, they're basically sending Russia the message of take it all at this point, right? Because Russia's repeatedly said, look, we require that Ukraine will be a neutral country. We require that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. So if NATO is telling Russia, hey, we are never going to agree to that, then they're sending Russia the message to basically say, keep on keeping on with this current conflict. So I honestly don't think, even if Trump comes in and he tries to present some sort of a treaty to Russia, I I doubt that Russia is going to agree to that in kind of good faith terms, right? Because Russia has tried time and time again. They've tried with the Minsk Accords of 2014 and 2015. They've tried with the Istanbul talks in Turkey back in early 2022. They've kind of put out there all of these opportunities to say, hey, let's talk, let's come to an agreement. Now, could there be some sort of agreement? Yes, absolutely. But I definitely think that Russia is going to be, I would say, incredibly skeptical here, given everything they've gone through with the United States up until this point. And even if they do look at Trump and think, okay, we believe this man 100%, right? We think that he means well here. Well, Russia is also very aware that the United States establishment, the United States government goes far beyond just the person in the White House. And so even if they have a couple years of some sort of peace agreement, they know that that could be used, that stalling time could be used, just as it was with the Minsk Accords of nearly a decade ago, where you later had former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, excuse me, coming out and saying that that was all about buying time, right? That Germany and the US and other members of the EU, that they had tricked Russia into being in a place where they were allowing to say, hey, sure, let's have peace. We'll keep this in mind. We'll have a peace agreement. And all the while, they were continuing to arm and fund the violent neo-Nazis within Ukraine, and doing so knowing that they were just buying time against Russia. And so I think that, Russia, on one hand, as we've heard from Russian President Putin, he said, look, we have not turned down talks. Here are our demands for talks. Here's what we require. But at the same time, he's also looking at the West and knowing everything that Russia has been through dealing with them up until this point. All right, sorry, that was a really long answer to a short question there, but hopefully it answered your question. All right, turning back to some of these other comments here. Let me see. Alrighty. Daniel says, thank you for the live stream. Looking forward to more. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, I have not done a live stream in a minute, and this is a much larger audience than I have gotten in the past. So I appreciate y'all for tuning in and contributing with those super chats as well. Let me see. We've got another. I know there was a comment up there, and I scrolled right past it, from someone saying that I believe their daughter went to. There we go. David was saying my best friend's daughter graduated a year after him. So that him being the suspected gunman in this shooting. I know that there's also some comments coming out about saying that this Thomas Michael Crooks, I believe, if I'm getting his name correct. Let me double check that there. I apologize. I know that I'm somewhere. Thomas Matthew Crooks. That's what it is. All right, I was close. Saying that he, I guess, attempted to try out for some sort of rifle team in high school, but his aim was so bad that he was kicked off of that team, which is kind of interesting. I guess also a little telling there. And again, a lot of questions there. I know that that's kind of what everyone is bringing up and wondering, okay, what in the world actually happened there? me see as I go through these other comments. Saying Mark says the future is multipolar, but the USA hates that. Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that, a lot of these countries that have been in a position, you look at those countries within Africa. I mean, you see all of the different military coups that we've had in West Africa in particular for about the last 4 years. And it's such a reminder that you have countries around the world that are sick and tired of the former colonial powers within Europe. They're sick and tired of the United States, and they are fighting back on their end. And they're looking at other countries like China and like Russia and realizing, oh, hey, we can work with these countries, have a mutually beneficial relationship with these countries. This is something that we should pursue. Alrighty, I've also got a comment here from Samira Taha that says peace from occupied Palestine. Thank you so much for your comment. I know that it's hard with all of the news cycle and everything going on. I know that there are a number of massacres being carried out by Israel in the Gaza Strip using weapons that were made in the USA, even just this weekend, and we've seen it through the last week. And my heart is with the people there. I mean, it is devastating to watch as an American, knowing that my government is supporting a genocide that is playing out in front of all of us, and knowing that the top contenders, again, this goes back to the options that we have for president, that you have top contenders like Trump, like Biden, even throwing RFK Jr. in there, that continue to be in a position of not just supporting Israel, but supporting a genocide that is openly happening in front of all of us. And I should add, I know there are other candidates who don't support it. I know that you've got Jill Stein for the Green Party. You've got Chase Oliver for the Libertarian Party that have spoken out and have been, I would say, very outspoken in their terminology, right? They are talking about a genocide. They are talking about the Palestinian people on their end. Let me see. I've got a comment here from David saying, who is better for Russia, Trump or Biden? Maybe Biden better because he will forget to send a check to Ukraine. Yeah, I think, and even Russian President Putin has addressed this, right? He's basically said, look, it's not like we have a preferred candidate. And again, this goes back to Russia kind of being in a position of knowing that the person sitting in the Oval Office does not determine U.S. foreign policy. If there's anything we've learned, since at least since the year 2000, it is that our foreign policy does not change based on the person in the White House. Even if think back to even Obama campaigning. I mean, he campaigned on ending the war in Afghanistan. He campaigned on making it look like he was going to be anti-war, anti-establishment, and then he turned out to be the exact opposite of that, right? He came into office and literally became nicknamed the Drone King because he broke every record, overthrew a number of governments. And I think that that's a position that the American people are in, even with someone like Trump, who also very outspoken, right? He claims that he's going to come in, he's going to end the war in Ukraine. He has been critical of the Biden administration, and rightfully so, right up until he gets to the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And that has got to be the biggest frustration there, right? When you watch someone like him, and this goes to RFK Jr. as well. I don't agree with all of their policies, but to see people that get it on Ukraine, they see it so clearly on Ukraine, and they're able to call out the US government for waging a proxy war against Russia. And then it's like they turn to Gaza and their mind just goes blank, and they don't see the hypocrisy of it all, unfortunately. All right, let's get into some more of the comments. Thank you guys for all of your comments saying you want more live streams. All right, noted. I will keep that in mind. And when it comes down to, let me see. Going back to, and I know I've got comments here from like foreign policy, talking about US foreign policy, all the way to going back to the assassination attempt on Trump. So I apologize if I'm jumping around here. I hope that y'all are able to follow everything. I'm sure you are. But going back to this comment, from President Jesus talking about the assassination attempt and saying, has anyone found this kid's social media profile yet? That's one thing I actually have not seen. I mean, I've seen pictures of him that appear to be from his high school graduation, pictures that are showing him in like grade school, but I haven't seen much about him on social media. And that does come as a surprise because typically, if you have someone who is deciding to carry out a mass shooting, to carry out an attempted assassination, right, they are going to be in a position where they leave some kind of manifesto, some kind of, social media presence to say why they did what they did. I guess unless you're at the Las Vegas shooter, in which case we still do not have answers about the largest, I don't even know if it's the largest at this point. I believe it still is, mass shooting in modern US history, at least. Another comment here. This is such an American thing. This says high schools have rifle teams, going back to talking about the suspected gunman not getting into his school's rifle team. I don't know if it was specifically from the high school. I'm in Texas and we have a thing called 4-H, which is basically a group that you can join. It's extracurricular. It's not necessarily with your high school, where yes, you can join a rifle team, you can go to shooting competitions, that sort of thing. Maybe probably just a purely American thing, and maybe even a more so Texas thing, although this kid was over in Pennsylvania. So again, keeping an eye on kind of the different reports that are coming out. All right, Josh is chiming in here, and he's also putting a lot of work into moderating y'all's comments. So be nice, don't give him too much work there. And he says, at the moment, it doesn't appear the shooter has social media. Thank you for that clarification there. And yeah, I'm surprised, and I guess maybe that comes back to the continuing questions that we're asking, right? We're going, okay, when it feels like things don't add up, it feels like if you were going to be someone to decide that you were going to attempt to assassinate the former president of the United States, that you would at least have some kind of manifesto, some kind of, I don't know, Facebook post out there explaining what you were doing and why you were doing it. Let me see. Let's see. We've got one comment here saying, no one knows what Trump will do, except it seems like he's all for Israeli genocide, having received major funding from Miriam Adelson, and he, like Biden, are xenophobic. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I mean, I remember back to Trump when he was campaigning back in 2016, and he kind of talked about a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine, and then he was very quickly reprimanded by Israel. And ever since then, I think that has really played a role in his rhetoric. And obviously we saw during his administration, he increased tensions even more in the region. And so unfortunately, I don't expect him to change anything, although it doesn't seem like, I mean, who knows if Jared Kushner will pop back in and be a close member of, if he were to have a second term in office, if Jared Kushner would come along and be as involved. That's always a major question, where there obviously is some speculation there. All right, checking out other comments. And I had one other thing that I wanted to touch on that I will get to. I'm just not keeping up with all of the comments here. Let me see. Alrighty. Okay, I'm going to turn now to one more thing that I wanted to show. If I can, oh, no. Okay, I didn't do anything. Hold on, sorry. I closed out one thing that I did not mean to close out. That's all of the stuff going on the end. I appreciate all of the live streamers who have people who do all this for them. I am just here to put up the graphics on the screen and to attempt to do it correctly. And then I have Josh helping out with moderating in the comments, which is much appreciated. All right. So the other one I wanted to pull up was a tweet from former President Barack Obama and his reaction to the assassination attempt on Trump, in which he says there is absolutely no place for political violence in our democracy. Although we don't yet know exactly what happened, we should all be relieved that former President Trump wasn't seriously hurt and use this moment to recommit ourselves to civility and respect in our politics. Michelle and I are wishing him a quick recovery. All right, I can't get over the fact that Obama wants to talk about political violence, right? He wants to claim that we really need to stop this violence, and it's not just Obama. I'm picking on him because his tweet was there. It's Nancy Pelosi. It is every other politician. Drag Joe Biden into it, right? All of those who literally have told us Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy. Donald Trump has to be eliminated, and then they want to turn around when there's an assassination attempt on the man's life. They turn around and they insist, well, oh, we need to be, more careful with the rhetoric that we're putting out there. We need to make sure that there's no political violence. It's like, okay, pick a lane, right? Pick what you want to happen. Because again, when you are telling the American people that someone is a threat to them, you're basically telling them, hey, some of you, one of you needs to take up arms and you need to do something about it. And it is so incredibly hypocritical to me to watch these people who, it goes back to their rhetoric. It also goes back to their own policies. I mean, who is Obama to turn down violence of literally any kind after the 8 years that he spent in office, after the wars that he waged, the wars that he continued, the blood that is on his hands from everything he has done, whether that be, Ukraine, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, these 7 countries that Obama illegally bombed while he was in office. And every place there where you see these politicians who they suddenly want to start talking about violence. And it's like, you continued on and played a role in waging a violent US foreign policy that we are still living in the aftermath isn't even the right word, right? We're still living it out to this day. The Maidan coup that the US helped wage in Ukraine in 2014. Guess what? We're still dealing with the after effects of that today. We're seeing what happens when the US arms and trains and funds violent neo-Nazis and how that can lead to a much broader conflict in which the US is more than happy to wage a proxy war against Russia. We're seeing it in the Middle East, where everything that the US has supported and its ongoing support for Israel and its open support for what is now a genocide in the Gaza Strip that is carried out by Israel with US made weapons. I mean, the Biden administration wants you to clap for them because they pulled back on sending some 2,000-pound bombs to Israel to use on the Palestinian people in Gaza. You know what they are sending? 500-pound bombs, plenty of them. It is so hypocritical to me to look at this place that we're in right now and to think, well, wait a second. You want us to clap and cheer for you because you built a pier off the Gaza Strip and you claim that that was going to help get aid in, but yet right now you are refusing to force Israel to lift its blockade. Even as, I mean, we had that Lancet report that came out this week that said, hey, the death toll in Gaza, it's not likely under 40,000 as it's being officially reported. People are starving to death. They're dying from a lack of medical care. They're dying from this ongoing, not just bombardment that Israel is carrying out, but also this ongoing blockade. And the US is refusing to do anything about that. They've refused time and time again to allow the United Nations Security Council to step in and to do what it should be doing under international law. And so to hear any US politician claim that, oh, we need to call out violence, whether it be political violence or whatever version of violence they want to, target here, to hear any of them say that is just laughable at this point, right? Obama, Pelosi, all these people who have literally waged wars around the world in their furthering of US foreign policy. But you look at someone like Nancy Pelosi and you remember her little vanity trip that she took to Taiwan, in which she literally violated Chinese airspace and almost caught, well, she did cause arguably an international incident. Would have been more of an incident if Beijing had actually shot her plane down. But it is a reminder that you have the US in this position of trying to wage World War III, it feels like, on a number of different pathways. And the question just kind of seems to be, okay, how are we getting to World War III? Is it against Russia? Is it against China? Is it against Iran? Because Israel can't stop and wants to wage war, wants to drag their big brother, the United States, into it with them. It is a crazy, crazy time that we are in right now. That is to say the least. All right, let me check in on some comments here. We've got Keith Stone saying that Trump is a threat to ending the war in Ukraine. I mean, I think that could definitely be a possibility. Now, I am again, I always go back to being skeptical about Trump's foreign policy. Now, one of the things that I think definitely separates him from Biden is that for Biden, the war in Ukraine is personal. His family is personally involved. He was involved with the Maidan coup. His son was involved with Burisma and some other involvement there. And so for Biden, his support in Ukraine is absolutely personal. It's something that he has really taken to heart. Trump doesn't have that, right? Trump, it's like, okay, what are we getting out of this? He would be coming in if he is reelected in November and he comes in January, then he's coming in nearly 3 years into this and he's going, okay, the US has wasted how much money on Ukraine and what have we gotten for it? Oh, we tried to fight a proxy war against Russia. We have seen Russia put in a position where instead of the US ruining their economy and isolating them from the rest of the world like they were trying to do, the absolute opposite has happened. And we've seen countries like Russia and China reducing their reliance on the US in record time, building alliances with each other. And I can imagine that if Trump comes back in January, he's going, why are we spending all this money and all these resources on it? And so I would agree that definitely is a threat to the US establishment. The question for me just becomes, okay, if Trump is reelected, who is his vice president? Who are the members of his cabinet? Goodness, who is he taking advice from on his end? Who is in his ear? And how is that going to impact his foreign policy? Because we saw it in real time with Trump's first term. We saw people like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton in his cabinet. I mean, the fact that the US went after Venezuela, do y'all remember that? When the US decided, oh, we're going to, help overthrow the sitting president of Venezuela, and we're going to do it by literally deciding that this random guy, Juan Guaido, is the new president of Venezuela. It looks ridiculous, did look ridiculous at the time, looks even more ridiculous in retrospect, but it is such a reminder that that wasn't Trump's pet project. No, that was arguably John Bolton's pet project. Some of these members of his administration that he allowed to be in his ear. Now, as Trump learned since then, sure, I think he's learned a lot. But I do think that as we've seen with Trump, it's really important to pay attention to the people who are around him, the people who are really in his ear giving him advice, and how that puts his foreign policy in perspective as well. All right, let me check out some of these comments here. Y'all are watching this video at a record rate that I have not seen on my channel. So I really appreciate you tuning in here. Let me see what we've got here. I know some people are saying they're trying to post pictures. I don't know if you can do that in the YouTube chat. I don't believe you can. Let me see. What else we've got here? Righty. Let me check in on here. Some comments on. All right, let's put up this one. We've got this comment saying they always talk out both sides of their mouth. Yeah, I would say that's kind of US, well, isn't it politics as a whole? It's really US politics as a whole. It's incredibly frustrating to watch the time that we're in as we're looking at I guess which is going to be another contest of Trump versus Biden. I'm very curious to see. Again, we've had this conversation this last 2 weeks for that matter, about Joe Biden. Is he able to run? Is he able to talk without messing up the names of world leaders, his own vice president? I mean, I think that this week really showcased where Biden is at when he literally said, here's President Putin, the president of Ukraine, and he was referring to Zelensky. And then a couple hours later, he's referring to Vice President Trump. I mean, I have a lot of questions there, again, about whether they're going to keep Biden in. I think another question is, we look back to the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan in the 80s, and you have to remember that caused his uh, support to soar, right, in ratings. He became even more popular. So I think the expectation is that Trump's popularity is going to soar. Biden's is probably going to fall a little bit. And the question becomes, because at this point, if Trump is still alive in November and he's still here to run for the White House, I don't see how he doesn't win unless things, change majorly between now and November, which it is possible that they will. I could be 100% wrong with that, but it's hard to see Trump surviving an assassination attempt and that not just being what secures him a second term in office at this point. Now, the question then becomes, again, if nothing changes, if we continue on the same path that we're on in November, if there are no more attempts to target Trump and he is still there to be on the ballot in November, I know that there's a lot of moving parts there, obviously. If all of that happens, what are the Democrats going to do? Are they going to just leave up Biden, let him lose this election, and then move on? And two, on top of that, the Democrats, I've been asking the question, watching them for a while now, do they actually want to win the 2024 election, right? Because on their end, the last 4 years, Democrats have had to deal with some level of accountability to a certain extent, right? They've got the majority in the Senate. They're very close to having the majority in the House, and they've got Joe Biden in the White House. And so a level of accountability has had to be taken on their end, whether they want to take it or not. And so to that end, it makes me wonder, do they actually want to win in 2024? Or could they just spend the next 4 years fundraising, getting more and more money by just sitting there and saying, here's how bad Trump is for another 4 years? Because arguably, that's the last 4 years that they have when it comes to Trump. He may have someone right behind him who's exactly like him, but there's no one quite like Donald Trump. So I do wonder sometimes, do Democrats actually want to win in 2024? And would it almost be easier for them to just leave Biden up there? Now, granted, it seems as though he would be completely embarrassed in another presidential debate that they have coming up. But do they leave him on the ticket, let him lose, let Trump have another 4 years, then they get even more fundraising for the next 4 years, and then they decide what to do? Because as we've seen, the DNC has been so focused on, vote insert name here because they are not Donald Trump. They've been so focused on just, our candidate isn't Trump. Trump's, right, a threat to democracy, as they keep saying. And with that focus comes the reality that they don't seem to have anyone primed to take that slot after Biden. It's actually kind of shocking that they don't, given the fact that all of these concerns about Biden's mental state. I mean, none of this is new. This has all been around for years. Has it gotten worse? It appears that it has, but none of this is new. And so the Democrats, arguably, they should have had someone in the wings waiting. They should have had a vice president that would be fine to take over. Instead, they have Kamala Harris, who somehow is just as unpopular now as she was when she was running against Biden for the Democratic nomination in 2020. And they really seem to be scrambling on, okay, what in the world do we do? Who do we put in after Biden? Is there someone who can beat Trump? And I think those conversations that were being had next week you compare them to the conversations that are going to be had in the week to come, and they may look a little bit different when it comes down to the situation of, okay, do we just let Biden write it out because we know that Trump is going to soar in the polls, we know that Trump is going to get even more support. Any Republicans who were kind of on the fence about, okay, do we go out and we vote for Trump, well, they're likely to come out now, and likely to come out in massive numbers given the fact that the man just survived an assassination attempt. So I'm very curious to see what they are likely to do as a result of everything that we're seeing here. All right, it looks like I have a whole new section of comments I didn't even realize. So thank you all for that. Okay, let me see. Answered that one. Let me check out on this one from Duly Noted. And thank you for the super chat there. Again, I really appreciate it. Saying Biden signed a 10-year pact with Zelensky. Trump seemed he wanted to reverse everything Obama did. Is this possible with this pact in a second Trump term, or will he succumb to political, corporate, deep state pressure again? One of the things that I noticed about the 10-year pact that Biden and Zelensky agreed to was it seemed like, at least according to the reports that I saw, that it would have been really easy for a second president to come in and to basically rip up the agreement, say we're done with this. So it seems as though it would be easy for Trump to do that. I think the biggest question is going to be, how important is the ongoing conflict in Ukraine to the US establishment, right? Because we know that they always want to have a money laundering quote unquote war. It was Afghanistan for 2 decades. And then as soon as Afghanistan ended, they started really setting their sights on Ukraine in a way like they never had before. You started seeing more rumblings about Ukraine possibly joining NATO. You had the rhetoric from Zelensky claiming, oh, we can acquire nuclear weapons. And you had the response from Putin that we saw as a result of that. And so I think that would be the biggest question for me. If you do have a second Trump term, is how hard are the powers that be within the US establishment, the ones that we don't see, how hard are they going to fight for Ukraine? And is there going to be some sort of a, at least in Trump's mind now, again, this is not to say what Russia would do, but is there going to be some sort of quote unquote agreement that they come up with to say, okay, this is how things are going to proceed in Ukraine? Maybe it's not quite as much support as we have been giving, but then you also have to have the question of how long Ukraine can possibly survive at this point. I mean, they've had major manpower shortages. They have a situation in which you have men being dragged off the street, forced to go to war, not to win, not to, have any sort of success or victory, but to die. They're being sent to fight and to die. It is a very grim situation in Ukraine right now. And the US has gotten to the point where they're basically keeping Zelensky's regime on life support. They're doing the bare minimum. And I just don't see that increasing. So that's kind of going to raise the question of how long the Kiev regime can really survive on its end. Not to say that they would fall apart tomorrow, but to say that it would likely be a situation where I don't know how many more years they're able to survive. And if Trump does come in and he does cut funding to Ukraine, then that puts the EU in a position where they're going to have to decide how much more involved they want to get, I should say, on their end. So I think that there's a lot of moving parts that could kind of impact what ends up happening. If that answers your question there. All right, let me check out these other super chats here. We got another one, and thank you as always for your contribution that says, I'm already looking forward to the Kamala Trump debate. I mean, if Biden doesn't stay in, I've seen a lot of reports really throwing Kamala Harris out there saying, look, I mean, she is the vice president. She's the next in line. We should really get ready for her to be the Democratic nominee. Now, I don't think that Biden is going to go down without a fight, right? I would argue that he is going to do everything he can to stay in the race. Because, I mean, what does Biden have to look forward to after this? I mean, what does he have coming up after the White House? You're talking about a man who's in his 80s. He's already clearly struggling. There is no light at the end of the tunnel for him. And so I think he's going to fight tooth and nail to stay in. Now, if Democrats do select Kamala as their replacement, we did see Trump kind of forecast that a little bit in the recent rally he had. I believe it was a week ago in Florida. He was commenting on Biden. He was saying, look, the Democrats don't even want Biden as their nominee. He also started talking about Harris. He started talking about how when the Biden administration first came to be, what did they do? They put Harris in charge of fixing the US border, which, I mean, good luck to any one person who's going to magically fix the border, especially with Biden's policies. But they claim that they were putting her in charge of fixing the border. And so Trump really calling that out, I think I will say that was smart on his end, right? He's kind of previewing, okay, this is what we have to keep an eye on here. All right, let me check out some of the other comments here. I do have to go soon, so I will get to as many as I possibly can. Again, I appreciate y'all showing up and chiming in the comments here. We've got Ray J saying even Janet Yellen is now saying that these sanctions are a monumental failure, referring to the sanctions on Russia. And yeah, I mean, I wish I could. Maybe I need to go through and see some of Yellen's her sound bites from 2.5 years ago up to now, right? The fact that she was claiming that, oh, the Russian economy is going to crumble. And it's like anyone paying attention in 2022 would have told you that that was not going to be the case, right? It especially given the fact that Russia has the alliances that it does have with other countries like China, like India, like Saudi Arabia, like South Africa, right? It has all of these allies around the world. So the idea that if this group of countries in the West, if the US and its allies in Europe, if they get together and they gang up on Russia, that then Russia is just going to magically fall apart. It shows me that they live in a bubble and they clearly have not been paying attention here, which I think is something very big to keep an eye on. Indeed. All right, let me see if I can keep up with all of the comments here. Got a few more. All righty. I think I'm almost up to date on all this. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for chiming in as well there. All right, so we've made it to the 1 hour, a little bit over the 1 hour mark here. Y'all have me just talking away. And again, I appreciate you all tuning in here. Now, when it comes to, let's see, wrapping things up. Okay, sorry, I'm getting distracted. When it comes to wrapping things up and looking into the next week ahead, I know you guys are watching from a variety of platforms. So as we go into this next week, I'm sure there will be much more talk about this assassination attempt on Trump, what did happen, what we know about what happened. I will definitely try to be keeping an eye on that and also keeping an eye on everything else when it comes to the international news that we are watching. I've been trying to do, I know I haven't been as good lately about having, well, one, live streams, two, some of my commentary videos where it's just me talking like I'm talking to you right now. I've been kind of focusing more on interviews, so I'll be trying to focus on a little bit of everything. I'll have some more interviews coming out this week. But if you do want to contribute to my work, if you like what you see here, you can always sign up for my group over on Patreon. That's where you can also chime in if there are some guests that you really want me to reach out to interview. I will always try. If you give me a guest suggestion, I will do my best to reach out and to see if I can get that person on to have a sit-down interview with them. So definitely be sure to check that out. That is patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. I try to tag it in all of my videos at the end. I also have a page on Substack, which you can check out. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where I will post all of my videos as soon as they're live. I'll try to definitely, when it's some of those videos breaking down, more commentary, I'll try to have the sources in the bottom. That's where you can find those. I need to get better about including those in some of these interview videos. Maybe that'll be something on the horizon that I can work on. So you also have that to look forward to. Be sure to check those out there. I also have subscriptions enabled on YouTube if you want to sign up and check out those there. Whatever way you're able to support, just know that I appreciate it so much. I appreciate y'all showing up today. I had no idea that so many people would actually come on to watch this live stream. So if you would like to see more videos like this, more commentary like this, where it's live and I can interact with all of y'all, then be sure to let me know that in the comments as well. Again, thank you guys so much, and I will catch you next time. I hope that y'all have a good rest of your day, your night, and a good week, and I will see you next time. Blevins out.